Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is the North Texas First Tech Challenge annual kickoff. Here we are. Finally, the game has been released, and hopefully many of you will have seen the game animation. And so we're going to spend the next hour or so going over the game, some of the details, let you see some more details about the components that exist for the game, some of the different ways that things are doing, and we're going to take your questions. With me today, of course, is Miss Emily Esch. Many of you know who have been doing First Tech Challenge for a while. She was our chief referee for the region last year. You want to say anything? Hello?
Hi, guys. I don't have a lot to say. I'm monitoring questions. Thank y'all all for coming. If y'all have seen the game already, it's super exciting. If you haven't, please go watch it because it is, in my opinion, one of the best games we've had in a while.
Yeah, everybody I've been talking to so far says that they really, really like this game. We also have on the call Joe Varnell, and can you unspotlight us here, Emily, so that Joe is there. Joe, if you want to say anything, we can do that. Can you unmute?
Hello.
Yourself.
Oh. Hello.
You're good, Joe.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Okay. Hello.
I'm Joe Varnell, first senior mentor here in North Texas. It does look like a great game, a fun game, and I can't wait to see how kids solve it.
So for those of you who have not met Joe before, he is the first senior mentor for the North Texas region. And that means he works with all of the different FIRST programs, particularly in our region, helping teams get started and being prepared for their events. And you'll see him at a lot of events as well. He wears many hats, from being a referee for First Lego League to being a referee, FTA, CSA, all sorts of things for us in First Tech Challenge. And of course, he's a big presence at First Robotics competition events as well. So Joe is a person that you can reach out to if you need to talk to somebody, or you're looking for teams or contacts, or just feel like you need some help. He won't necessarily be able to help you himself, but he always is able to help teams find the resources or contacts with people they need. Does that sound about right, Joe?
That sounds great. That's what I do. I want the teams to be successful.
Yeah, and that's really why so many of us are here, is to be able to let the teams be successful. So one of the things that I wanted to do today, there's so much happening in First Tech Challenge right now with the pandemic. If you saw the morning kickoff videos that came from First, then you know that we now have the possibility of what are called remote events in addition to the traditional events that we've had. These events are for if we're not able to gather, if we're not able to bring teams together in the traditional format, then there's a remote option available that we can be using. Some of you have been participating in the calls that we've been doing, and the remote format will be the way that we go forward if we're not able to go with traditional events. But the other thing that's happened is that First has moved the season back in the calendar year. And so all of the events for First Tech Challenge throughout the year are being shifted back in time. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But in today's webinar, I didn't want to focus too much on the remote events. If you have a few questions here and there, we can do that. And part of the reason is that some of the details, even we as partners don't yet know all of the details of the mechanics of how it's all going to work. So I can answer questions generally, but there'll be another webinar sometime in the future where we cover remote events in detail. And before I forget, before we get too far, I do want to recognize our program sponsors for First Tech Challenge in North Texas this year. So first of all, I'd really like to give a special thanks to Rev Robotics. They've been kind enough to let us use their broadcasting studio and their facilities to bring this webinar here today. And to provide some personnel support with cameras and video help. And so that's making my job a lot easier. Many of you who have come to these events in the past, you know, we would try to gather at a school or a gym or somewhere where people could see the fields. We can't do that now. So this is the approach that we're taking as well. So shout out to Rev Robotics for that. Also, Rev Robotics has become a program sponsor for North Texas FTC for the entire season. So we thank them for that. We also will recognize Collins Aerospace. They're continuing to fund us into the upcoming season, and of course, First in Texas. And I just want to do a couple of housekeeping notes for teams. So if you haven't already, keep in mind that the First in Texas grants are now open. So please, please, please go and apply for First in Texas grants. Last year, there was actually some money left over in First Tech Challenge, where they went through all of the teams on the list, and there was still more that could be given out. So please go apply for First in Texas grants. Also, Rev has a team grant that they're giving away for teams. So be sure and go to the Rev Robotics website and click on the links there to be able to apply to that. I believe the application deadline for that is Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. So you want to get those applications in soon. So we're definitely looking to do that. At this point, I was going to do a field overview, but I don't know if Greg is ready for me to go do the walkthrough. Just in lieu of that, can we roll clip number 1? And we can make that work. We may go in. We have a field set up in the Rev warehouse. Can you start the clip from the beginning so that we can get the full shot? There we go. That's what a field looks like in person. And you may have seen when Aaron Fadden from First Headquarters also did a walkthrough. This is a field that I set up last night at my house so that we can look at the different components that are there. There you're looking at the starting lines for blue, the wobble goals, the starting point for the disc. Then there are the target zones where the wobble goes go, the towers on the end of the field away from the audience, and then of course the mirror image on the red side. So that gives you kind of a sense, a closer up view of the different components. And the next part of this video actually goes through and walks around the field a little bit, kind of to give a little bit better sense of scale. If you know the size of the tiles, they're about 2 foot square. So those blue squares are about 2 foot square. Everything is based on 2 foot intervals this year. Then you have the tower goals that we're looking at now with the high, middle, and low options, both for red and blue. There are graphics on the wall, what we commonly call pictographs left over from the relic recovery season. But those are graphics that robots can use for navigation to be able to see the figure out where they are on the field. So that gives you kind of a view. And I have a few other video clips that we may show throughout the webinar today to kind of talk about, to be able to show different aspects of how the field physically functions and how things work. Are we getting questions in yet?
We are not.
We are not. So I'm going to go ahead and invite teams to start posting questions in the Q&A channel if you have questions about the rules. While I go through a brief walkthrough of the different aspects of the game, we did have the game reveal video that came out earlier, but I'll just talk through the different parts of the game and what the scoring options are. And Emily will hopefully correct me on the point values because I'm not sure that I have them memorized.
Real fast, I got a question.
Oh, yes.
Got questions. Okay, so I have a question from Justine that says, can rings be placed on the wobble goal before the end game and still be scored when placed on the starting line? There is a rule, I can't remember off the top of my head what number it is, so give me just a second. I believe it's GS9, wobble goal constraints. If it's not that one, it's another one, but there is a specific rule that you are not allowed to place rings on the wobble goal until end game. And then if I get some clarity on still be scored when placed on the starting line, are you asking if you can continue to store or score rings after you've moved the wobble goal to the starting line? If you could give me some more clarity on that, I can answer that question.
If that is the question, then the answer is yes. You can. You can. So if that's the question, if you can place the wobble goals and then you can put rings on them and so forth after that.
There's been multiple questions about how much a wobble goal weighs.
So I brought a scale for that purpose.
Yeah, so I'll let Patrick weigh that.
Because I knew people were going to ask, like, what are dimensions and what does it weigh? Because those are the questions that I would have. So I'm going to have my scale here and I'll put this wobble goal on it with no rings. And it looks like it comes out to about 14.4 ounces or if we want to know it in grams, it's about 408 grams according to my scale. This isn't a super precise scale, but you only need little bits there to look at it. So 408 grams or so just for this one wobble goal. And let's just check for consistency real quick while you can look up some other questions that are coming in. But this one comes out to 412 grams, so about 410. 410 grams for the wobble goal. And they are pretty well weighted on the bottom. You can see just like from me having it here on the scale, it does tend to wobble, but it doesn't want to fall over very easily. You have to get to a pretty substantial, pretty extreme angle before it will stay tipped over. It tends to want to stay upright. So.
Joe asked how much the rings weigh.
The rings are 1.1 ounce. I did check that, or 30 grams. So they're pretty light. And the thing that the videos haven't really shown about the rings so far, and that wasn't done, is just how flexible they are. So here I have this ring here, and I'll just show that it's really flexible. Like I can do a little mouth thing here, right? So it's really flexible in terms of how it can bend. And I know that people, among the few people that I've talked with, when they see one of these rings for the first time, it's like, wow, that has a lot of flex to it. So that's something that you'll want to deal with when building your robot and your designs, is the compliance level of these rings. I almost think of them as being kind of like a Nerf product, not exactly in terms of the outside texture, but they seem to be very sturdy. They don't seem to take a lot of damage or anything, but they are indeed very flexible. They fly really well too, so which is good for this game.
Okay, so I have several rule questions that I will try to answer in order. It's easier if you guys put them in the Q&A form because it's a little bit easier for me to read. They don't get pushed back into the chat as far.
Yeah, there's a Q&A forum and there's a chat. So if you can put your questions into the Q&A forum, we'll get to them quicker.
Yes. So I do have one from the chat. Can you sit in front of the return thing, like where the rings come back, and just turn and put them in the lowest goal and then repeat until the end of the game? So I know that the issue with this is that you have to let a ring hit the floor before you can go grab it yourself. And unless you have a really good intake that can sit there and scoop them up really fast, though, like he said, Patrick said, they weigh nothing. Once they're slotted in, those things will shoot across the field really fast. We can demonstrate that when we get on the field a little bit later, but they will go across the field. So it's a strategy that I think that you could potentially do. The other problem, of course, being that you want to be careful how you're blocking other robots from interacting with game elements.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think I saw a rule there that it's speculation. I'd have to look it up or have Emily look it up. But that you couldn't have a strategy that would basically deny the elements to all the other robots.
Actually, that's what Aaron said in the.
Right.
Aaron said specifically in the FTC official kickoff video that the strategy of sitting there trying to just stay right in front of that goal was not going to be viable through the rules. I don't know the specific rule. I can figure it out for you.
GS6.
Some of us were talking about the game, earlier, a day or two ago when the partners got the rules, and we're speculating that if there's not a rule preventing that strategy, there almost certainly will be one. So watch the Q&A forum, things like that, but that makes for a really boring game if all that happens is rings come out and people feed them back in. So I'm expecting that to not be a valid strategy for this season.
Joe says GS6's ring has to hit the floor.
Yes.
Okay, another question is, are we required to shoot the rings, or are we allowed to extend an arm over the scoring line to score in the high mid sections? GS12 says no. So the GS12 is illegal tower goal scoring. For high and mid, you have to be within, you can't place, you have to launch. You have to launch a ring to get the mid and highs.
And the key point is the words in. And so let me just point that when you look at the game manuals and you look at the individual rules that are there, keep in mind that anything that's italicized is because it has a definition. It has a very specific definition. And I don't know if GS1, GS12 is the one that says this, but I believe the rule for launching is you have to be completely in the launching area. And the definition of completely in is that all parts of your robot have to be in the volume, and in this case, completely in the volume that is the launching area. So you can't extend out towards the goal outside of the launching area, even if you're not touching the ground, in order to deliver a ring or to send a ring into the goal. So you really do have to have your robot behind all parts of your robot in the launching area at the time that you send the ring.
Okay, so another question is there / what is the rule regarding how long a team member can hold a ring before putting it back onto the field? So that's going to be GS4, human player ring handling. And there's a lot of subsections to that rule, but it says specifically in GS4 that as soon as rings are safe to collect from the tower, that they have to be put back onto the field. There are only 20 rings. It avoids starvation. A human player cannot hold on to them I was trying to think of the word we usually use, like hoard or anything. You have to be throwing them back onto the field as soon as you're getting.
Sending them back through the chute.
Yes.
Not throwing them on the field.
Not throwing them on the field. Sending them through the chute. Yes, Patrick, that is correct. It's one of the subsections of GS4. As always, actually, I'm going to take this as a moment to campaign what I would normally campaign. If you are a human player this year, you need to know GS1 and GS4 forwards and backwards. We had such an issue last year with human players getting penalized because they did not know the human player rules. If you're going to be on the field, know the rules, please. It keeps you safe and it keeps refs safe, and it just makes for a better day for everyone if you make sure you know your human player rules.
The other thing that I'll say about that is that this has been a feature of some FIRST robotics competition games. And while there's not an exact, where human players have to reintroduce elements onto the field, and while there's not always an exact correspondence between FIRST robotics competition and FIRST tech challenge, what I expect to see is some sort of clarification to the effect that human players need to be making a good faith effort to get the rings back onto the field. So if you're just standing there and there are rings there and you're not feeding them back in, you're likely to get warned by a referee about it and possibly receive penalties. But as long as the human player is working to deliver the rings back onto the field, then you're likely to be okay.
Okay, I have another question. Can you use a cannon to put the wobble goal outside the ring and end game? I'm very confused about this wording. If you mean cannon as in, can you launch the wobble goal out of the field? No. I believe it is GS7 launching of game elements explicitly says that you cannot launch wobble goals. So when you say cannon, I'm concerned that you're going to shoot the wobble goal outside of the field. It needs to be like dropped. I'm sure they'll have some clarification in the game form, as they typically do, about the discrepancies between launched and dropped. But it's a drop zone, so I assume that their intent with that is that it needs to have as little horizontal motion as possible.
Just as a short break here real quick, we'll probably go do a field walkthrough. We have a field here set up in just a little bit. So if you have any specific questions about things you'd like to see about the field, send those to us, because I have to go into the other part of the, I have to leave this desk to be able to go show the field where we have the field set up. And so we'll let Emily ask a few more questions, and I'll take I'll get a list of questions. So send those in so that I can know what to demonstrate when we get to the field.
So there are a lot of questions about the rings. We'll answer those during the field. It's a lot about just what they're made of, sizing and stuff like that. I think we can answer that.
We can do it now.
Okay.
I think it's worthwhile. We have them here. It's actually easier here. So they're 5 inches in diameter, and these are, you can look in the game manuals for the exact specs, but they're 5 inches in diameter. The middle hole is about 3 inches in diameter, and they're 3/4 of an inch thick. So that's the general like shape of the ring. The rings are a component that if we are to do remote events in North Texas, then you can't like make your own of these. You can't 3D print them. You can't do that and use those in an official competition. So I believe I was told a month or so ago that there will be options by which you can purchase the rings separately. And same thing for the Wobble goals, that there will be a way to purchase the Wobble goals separately without having to buy a whole half field. And there have been discussions that there will be do-it-yourself options for building the tower goals. If you don't want to spend the money from AndyMart to buy an official set, or you'd like to find a lower cost option, then they're working on ways to have lower cost options for the tower goals, but you really do need the real rings and you really do need the real Wobble goals. Were there any other questions on the rings that you saw there, Emily?
What are they made out of was the big one.
I don't know. If it's not in the rules, then probably contact Andy Mark or look and see, but I have not seen the actual material mentioned anywhere.
Okay, so I have another question. What is the weight limit for robots? There isn't a weight limit this year, right?
There's not a weight limit for robots. They've taken that out because they didn't want everybody to have a scale.
Okay, I have another question. What is the diameter of the Wobble goal where you put the rings on? So I assume you mean this section of the Wobble goal. It can't be more than an inch.
The diameter of the pipe is actually listed in the game manuals. They do say it there, but it looks like it's 1.125 inches. Just measuring it there. And then the base is about 8 inches diameter for the base at the top. And of course it wobbles, it's kind of circular here on the bottom. So 8 inches for this large, 8 inches for this large circle that's here, and then 1.125 inches for the pipe, the center part. And there is a rubber cap or a vinyl cap that goes on the top as well to first of all give it something to better grab onto, and also to protect the edges of the pipe.
Okay. I have another question about extending from the launching zone to score into the tower. So it really depends on what you're trying to score. I imagine if you were like in the launching zone or over the line and you extend to score into the low goal, that might be okay. But you cannot extend to score into the mid or high goal. You have to be completely within the launch zone to score into those goals. And that's going to be defined by GS12.
And I should also mention that's true for the power shots as well.
Yes.
So the power shots are the little bars that exist that are between the two tower goals. Those you have to be completely in the launching area in order to score those with the rings as well.
Is there a penalty against deploying rings in a way that obstructs the path of the opposing robot? I would need more clarity on your question. When you say deploying rings, like the human player deploying rings, the robot deploying rings, they do not weigh very much. They're not really going to get in the way of your opposing robots.
They might.
They might.
We were talking about this yesterday about whether teams might have trouble with their wheels getting caught inside of the
I imagine that would have to be based on interpretation from the refs if you like letting go of a ring was inadvertent or not.
And I agree. However, there is a rule that says you cannot use game elements to amplify or to increase or decrease the difficulty.
Yes, so it would be an inadvertent. We'd have to determine whether or not it's inadvertent.
But if it looks like you're deliberately trying to use the rings in a defensive way against other robots, that would certainly be a penalty. It does require some judgment on the part of the referees.
Okay, so there's another one. Okay, does the tower goal count as outside of the field? It is part of the field. There's a definition in the game-specific rules. I don't remember exactly where or it might just be in the gameplay overall that says that like if you're like extending to go into the low goal that you're likely going to go past the field walls and that is okay.
And that's okay. Yeah.
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 Are we allowed to use cardboard goals for virtual competitions? First has some information or had some information about that in their discussion earlier because Erin pulled out her showing off a cardboard goal that she had built. You can I think make, to my knowledge, make your tower goals out of anything. You're just gonna have to order the Wobble goals and the rings.
Yeah. If we do remote competitions, then yes, I'm pretty sure that that will be the I know that we've been told that it will be the case that you can use do-it-yourself towers, and then the fact that Erin showed the cardboard one in the kickoff video, that kind of gives a blessing to that you can do that. Now, I will say, just to break, our hope is to minimize the number of remote events that we'll have this season. The season kickoff is now, and normally we would start having our competition events in November and December. But this year we've been first in Texas, which is now the overall partner for North Texas FTC, has decided that there won't be any in-person competitions in calendar 2020, so not until January. And we're just basically going to push everything back a couple of months. So our competition season probably won't start until January at the earliest. We might have one remote event as an official event in December. I do expect us to have a lot of remote scrimmages though, so that would definitely be worth looking at. I expect our regional championship to be mid-March to early April, somewhere in there, depending on what the schedule gets. We're going to work on that. There is a state championship this year, which I'll talk about in a future webinar, but that's going to take place sometime in the May or June timeframe, and then first has moved the World Championship back to July for Houston. So we're all being given a lot of time to expand the season and be able to have more time flexibility for adjusting events. Have we gotten any field questions about the field?
I've gotten one that's, what is the dimension of the field?
Okay.
Which is 12 foot by 12 foot.
Right.
So
yeah, it's 12 by 12, the perimeter.
It'll be a little bit bigger with the tower goals.
Yeah, if you're setting up like in a school or a home environment, you really want to have a 16 by 16 area-ish, somewhere like that. Because the tower goals extend for about 18 to 24 inches behind the field when you get all of the parts there. Plus, you got to have room for a human to stand back there, and then you need places for the driver stations on either side. So this field takes up a bit more floor space than what we've seen in the past couple of seasons. So just be aware of, it's a little bit bigger. If you look at the remote manual, however, they show that they do a field setup where you only have one tower goal, and it's a 12 by 8 field. So you can save some space that way, but it is a little bit of space from one to the other.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions about like how far the rings roll. We can show that when we do the field.
And I was going to go ahead and go do that here in just a second.
If you want to go ahead and do that, that'll
Okay.
give me time to sort through all of the
It's going to take me a second to get to the field.
messages.
Oh, we have rings there, so I can leave these here.
Yes.
All right, so I'll be back with you in a moment, and we're going to just do a quick walkthrough on the field. I'm not able to hear your questions while I'm in there, so I'll just do a quick walkthrough, and then I'll be back in here. And if we need to go back there again, I imagine we can, or I have some video clips.
Okay, so I've gotten a couple questions about can you have a certain setup at the start of the game? Do you mean like where your robot placement is?
I will cover that.
Yeah, so Patrick will cover start lines. I will be answering everything as soon as we switch video over through the Q&A form as text. I will try to get to as many of you as fast as possible. So please bear with me because there are like 30 questions in here. How far can you throw the rings is one of them. I will try to get that question to Patrick. Okay. I will be
All right.
answering in here.
So I think I'm live. I hope I am. And so here we are. Here we have our field set up so you can kind of see, and you've got me on the field so you can kind of get a sense of scale. The parts of the field, and I'm going to start from front, which is the audience part, and move towards the back to be able to look at the different parts. So at the beginning of a match, all 4 robots will start on their starting lines. There are 2 starting lines for red, and there are 2 starting lines for blue. And the rule is that each robot picks a starting line. It's up to the alliance partners for blue to figure out which robot will be on which line. The robots must be touching this front wall and be over the line somewhere. Some part of the robot must be over the line. The other requirement is that the robot must be either possessing, that is holding, or touching the wobble goal. So you can, when you set up your robot, you can put the wobble goal on your robot. You can have your robot you could just set it next to your robot so it's touching, but every robot has to have a wobble goal either in contact with it or possessing it. Every robot also is given 3 rings at the start. So you may choose to load 1, 2, or 3 rings onto your robot at the beginning of the match. You can decline to do those, in which case they will simply go to the back and be fed in at the beginning of the teleop period. You can choose to preload those rings, or you can choose to have them be separate. So you'll have 4 robots, all starting here, all against the front row at the beginning of the match. Once the robots are set and all of the rings have been decided, randomly the computer will roll a die, and it will decide whether or not there will be 1, 0, or 4 rings on the starting spot. So, and that determines where the wobble goal should be placed in autonomous to score points. So if there are 0 rings chosen by the computer, these rings would also just go and be available to be loaded in after teleop. Then that means that robots to score in autonomous would need to place the wobble goal in this first target, and they have to be completely in. So that would be in, that would not be in, because the wobble goal is partially out, or it may be easier to see if I do it that way. Right, so that's for 0 rings. For 1 ring, if there's 1 ring at the start, then this becomes your target zone. If there are 4 rings at the start, then this becomes the target zone. So that's how the wobble goals work in autonomous. Also in autonomous, you have the option of scoring the rings that your robot were preloaded with, or if you can try and have your robot autonomously pick up these rings and score them as well. And you can either put them into the tower goals, or I believe it's 12, 6, and 3 points, or you can aim for the power shot targets. And I was confused when I first saw the video for this. It looks like the goal is to try and get a ring onto one of the pipes, but no, your goal is to simply knock it backwards. So if you're able to knock it backwards, each one of those pipes that you knock back is worth 15 points. So that's autonomous. Also, you get points if your robot can park on this white line, any part of the robot over the white line at the end of autonomous. Let me catch my breath. Once autonomous is finished, then the drivers are able to pick up their controllers, teleop begins, and now they can begin scoring rings into the tower goals. The tower goals are worth 2 points for the blue alliance, 4 points for the red alliance, the red pipes that are here, and 6 points for the blue alliance. Same on the other side, 6 points for red, 4 points for blue, 2 points for red. So the tower goals are your primary scoring opportunity in teleop. At the end game, which is the last 30 seconds of the match, the human players can reset the power shot targets. You have a little bit of grace period at the beginning of end game to do that. If you get to the end game and you haven't reset these by about 5 or 10 seconds into the end game, then you can't score them. During the end game, you can continue to score these spots. You can attempt to score the power shot targets for increased points. I believe they are 15 points again in that situation. And you can also score the wobble goals. To score the wobble goals in endgame, they must be in this zone, not in the launching area, which is that front part, at the beginning of endgame. And then you can score them by either returning them to the start line or by placing them outside the field. During the endgame, you can also put rings onto the wobble rolls in order to score additional points that way. So those are the basic scoring mechanisms. We had the Q&A question about how far do the rings go. They can go quite a ways. So let me just feed some through, and we'll see what happens on this field. So if I'm a human player for blue, and I've had some rings come over to my station, then I should start feeding them back onto the field. And if you just want to follow that ring there, you can see they tend to make it all the way to the front wall. Sometimes they do like veer off to the side, but they like to travel a long distance until they contact something. Let me try that also for the red gold real quick. So if I'm using the return shoot for the red side, then we'll see that, yeah, they can travel a pretty good distance, and it's not super consistent. There's some consistency to it, but where they end up can be a little bit variable. So that gives you kind of a sense of what the field looks like. I can't think of any other major field components, but if there are more questions we need to come out and I don't have a video, we'll come back over if we can. All right, so back to you, Emily.
All right, so I've been trying to answer as many questions as I can. Some of them Patrick needs to kind of be here for. To clarify, we are not hosting events in North Texas until at least January. We don't know how that's going to look to be virtual or in person. As soon as I find out more, or Patrick finds out more, we will let you know what our plan is, but we're sort of just filling out the season as it goes. Hi, Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you.
So I've gotten many questions. I'm trying to sort of get through them. A lot of people were asking about how freely do the power shots move while you were.
They're pretty free.
Yeah.
And let me, because I didn't want to do this live on camera, just a minute. So David, can you run clip 4 for us, clip number 4? So I did a little video clip. So here's the power shot targets. And that was just me throwing them from the launching line. And it took me about 3 or 4 takes to get this because I didn't want to show you how many misses I had. But you can see that they go back pretty easily. That one pipe that is on that set that I had there, there's a manufacturing defect, or something is out of tolerance on it because it tends to stick. And I would think that when we set up a field, we would make sure that all the pipes move fairly freely. But there's almost no friction on those pipes to be able to do that. And just run it one more time. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I got the first 2 shots pretty good, and then my aim wasn't quite so good. This is why we build robots to do these tasks for us, so that we can score the power shot goal there. So I've built something like 3 or 4 fields now, and they do they move back and forth pretty easily. And then is there a way we can shoot this one that's here? Yeah, okay. We have a goal here too, and so if we can switch to being able to see that. So we have a goal here in the room with us, and you can see that this is pretty loose. It doesn't take much force at all to make them move. So if you make my experience was a glancing blow would often score them. It needed to have some directness to it, but not too much. So thanks, Mac. So that would be my answer for that question.
I have a couple questions in here about the distance between the scoring line and the goals. By scoring line, I'm unclear on what you mean. I assume you mean the line that separates what is the launch zone and the rest of the field. That's going to be about 5 feet.
It's about
Right.
5 feet.
It's about 5 feet. It's a little bit over 5 feet, if I remember correctly, but it's about 5 feet of the field.
Yeah, it's probably better to say it's probably about 64 to 66 inches. The measurement, the field setup measurement is that line is 80 inches away from the front wall. And so if you just do the calculations, then you can kind of find out that it's around 64 to 66 inches away from the back wall. So you're going to be launching for a distance of about 5 or 6 feet at least.
I have another question. Does the half field have both tower goals? And the answer is no.
No, right?
Yes.
In a remote event, you would just need the one goal, and I think you get to choose whether you want it to be red or blue. You can choose which side you want it to be. And that's all that would be needed for a remote event setup where you have one robot per field.
Okay, so someone else asked, how does inspection work for remote events? Is it happening or is it based on honesty? Right now, I believe first take on it is that everything is based off of the fact that we believe that you are going to tell us the truth.
What some regions, and yes, that is the line I've heard as well. What some regions are looking at doing is to have, not necessarily as part of the competition, but remote inspections where it takes place over the course of the season, where we would like to have a team get on a Zoom call or a chat with one of our inspectors, and just with a handheld camera, a smartphone, something, let them kind of walk through the checklist with you as a team. When, I don't think that we can make that mandatory as yet, but we all know that we want to help teams make sure that they're playing by the rules and can achieve that. For those of you, every team that I know of in First Tech Challenge will have a story about all the things they didn't know their rookie season, or all the things they didn't understand because of a rule change. That's pretty common, and we know that. And so our goal isn't to penalize or restrict teams. Our goal is to let teams play and to give them all of the tools they need to follow the rules and to be able to do that. So throughout the season, I would expect that we'll offer some of these inspection opportunities for teams so that you can be inspected and you can be comfortable that your robot is meeting all of the requirements that we would need in order to do that. The other thing that I know we will be doing is that we will be having remote scrimmages here in the fall. I mean, as long as we're having the possibility of remote events, we should absolutely just do scrimmages that way. We can do them early in the fall. And as part of those scrimmages, they're not official competition events. So we can put in requirements, restrictions, or put in things we'd like to see teams do. And there, I think it's pretty likely that we'll say, hey, let's have an inspection as part of that. And hey, let's be sure that we see videos of all of the matches that you're able to run as part of the scrimmage, because that's really where so much of the value of First Tech Challenge is. It's not just what you do with your own robot, but what you get to see other people do with theirs. And so to the extent that we can promote that in the region, to have people posting videos of their robots, talking about what they're doing and the challenges they're encountering, we're going to try and take advantage of the remote format to make that even better than what we've ever been able to do before.
I have a question. Is this challenge with rings a totally new idea, or has it been done in previous seasons? So we did have Ring It Up a few years ago, but that wasn't launching rings. As I recall, that was placing them on like a wall piece. We've had launching games in the past. We had Velocity Vortex a few years ago as well, where people were launching balls into a center goal. I would also consider this game similar to some FRC games that we've seen in the past. If anyone here is familiar with FRC games, I actually think that some of the scoring elements are similar to, what was this last year's FRC game called?
Now you asked me, was it Deep Space?
No, it was Recharge.
Infinite Recharge.
Infinite Recharge.
Infinite Recharge.
Some of the scoring elements are somewhat similar to Infinite Recharge as well, if you'd like to go look at Infinite Recharge for some ideas.
I would add to that, there was in First Robotics competition history, there was a game played with Frisbees shooting
Yes.
frisbees into slots. I think that was the 2013
Yes,
season.
someone posted
And
2013.
so I know that the teams I'm working with, we're actually going to try and find alumni from those teams and say, you know, hey, what are the physics? What's the dynamics? What is it that we really want to know about? How do you make this round, flat thing fly through the air and go into a slot that's like about that tall, and to be able to do that accurately and from far distance? When I was not active in FIRST robotics competition at the time, and when I saw the frisbee game, and heard about what it was to my way of thinking, it was like, oh my God, that's a really hard challenge. And then to see how many robots were able to do amazing things with the frisbees it was inspiring. So I'm kind of happy to see that. That to me is very similar to this year's game. And as Emily said, there's a lot of similarities to Velocity Vortex in that you have to shoot things into a target and so on. So, I highly encourage teams to go look through archives, look for those past seasons, and as I mentioned, get in touch with some of those alumni. And you know, if they're not active in FIRST, this is their chance to get back in and to be part of a team. So definitely, there's precedence for this type of game.
Yes. So I do want to take a second before I start answering questions again to let you guys know that if you've asked a question and I have not answered it, it is likely because, one, I have 33 questions open right now, or we answered it earlier in the chat. We will try to get to those before we have to end here today. Again, just to refresh towards the end of the chat, I'm focusing more right now on other elements, but we're also recording this. So this will be online, I assume, up to sometime this week. So if your questions did not get answered, I'm so sorry. We will try to get it to as many as we can before we have to end this today.
Yes, and let me also add, I get to put in a plug for my chat clinics now.
Yes.
So starting in August, and I'm planning to continue this. Many of you know that in previous seasons, I was affiliated with the University of Texas at Dallas. The University of Texas at Dallas needed to end their affiliation with FIRST because of financial reasons. And so now it's being done under FIRST in Texas. One of the things that I really liked about the way that we did things at the University of Texas at Dallas, or UTD, was we would have weekend clinics for teams where coaches and team members could come in and learn about programming and robot building and design elements and all sorts of other things. Well, now I've taken those online. So every Thursday at 7 o'clock, I'm hosting what's basically called a North Texas FTC chat clinic. It's a Zoom meeting where people can sign up, and there's an open forum portion of those meetings where we just open the floor for people to have questions, and I expect that we'll have a lot of questions in the upcoming weeks about the game, so I'll be happy to take them there. But we're also looking for doing very topic-focused seminars or online meetings, and to be able to reproduce the clinic format that was there. So we've already identified that we're looking at topics on, programming in on-bot Java, programming in Android Studio, autonomous things, autonomous modes, things like that. Where in the past it would have been challenging for us to do so many of those sessions because we have to find a time when everybody can gather and to arrange the space and things like that. Now that we're doing so much online, I'm looking forward to a whole bunch of those types of things. So please definitely send me an email if there's specific things you want, or you can bring your questions to those as well.
Okay, I have a question, and you may be able to answer this better than I can. Can you launch rings into the logo?
I'm sure you can.
I believe you can. I've been looking since I saw this question, and there's nothing that says you can't.
Right.
So I believe you can. That may change in the coming weeks. This is also information for everyone. Please keep the FTC forum in the back of your mind and periodically check it, because a lot of questions you may have will be answered by the FTC game committee in coming weeks on the forum. And if you have any questions that don't get answered here today, please feel free to ask them there, because you will get answered by the people who made this game.
For those who are new to FTC, there's a section of the First Tech Challenge website on First Inspires called the Q&A forum, or the FTC forum. And that's the official place where you can get answers from the game design committee, the people who make the rules and interpret the rules for all of the rest of us to follow. So you should become familiar with that forum if you're a new team, and even if you're a team that's competed before but aren't familiar with it. because many times there'll be rule updates throughout the season that don't make it into the manuals, but the referees are aware of them, and so they will follow the updated rules. Any ruling that's made in the forum supersedes whatever may happen in the manuals. So you definitely want to be aware of the forum for that reason.
Yes. Can we demonstrate, I've gotten this question several times. I don't know if you did out there, can we demonstrate the role of a ring once it has been released back onto the field? You did demonstrate that? Okay.
I did demo that.
Yeah, because we got this question quite a while ago.
Yeah, the short answer is they will roll all the way to the other end of the field.
Yes.
They don't all roll to the other end of the field, but a lot of them do. And once they exit the chute, they tend to like go in different directions. They don't always go to the same spot. A really fun task would be to like send a bunch of rings through the chute, mark where they ended up, and see if it follows a bell curve pattern or something like that. See what the statistics are there. That would be really cool.
Yes. Another question is, would you get penalized for accidentally knocking over the opposite wobble goal that has rings on it? So I answered this as a type back when Patrick was in the other room, but I would like to just discuss it overall because I think it's a good clarification. Rule GS9, called wobble goal constraints, says that if you knock over your opponent's wobble goal, and so let's say I've got like 4 rings on my wobble goal and you're a red robot and you come and knock it over, every single one of those is no longer completely supported by the wobble goal. And when I say completely supported, it's another one of those definition rules where it has to, the weight has to be completely on the wobble goal. None of them are anymore. They're supported by the table as well as the wobble goal. And that would de-score all of them. So if you're the Red Alliance robot and you come over and knock this down, whether it's accidental or not, you de-scored 4 rings and thus will receive 4 minor penalties because it's a minor penalty per ring de-scored. So I would definitely pay attention to the wobble goal constraints because it'll highlight what the constraints for your own wobble goal are and for how you interact with your other team's wobble goals. Okay, so I have another question, and I looked for this one as well, and I really couldn't find anything on it, and it is, what is the order of gameplay for autonomous? I know that randomization for the starter line elements happens after teams select their Auton program, but I couldn't find anything about randomization of target zones.
So there's actually a flowchart in the in-game manual part 2.
Oh, yes.
Early on.
Yes.
I believe it's section 4.5 or something like that. But there's a flowchart that shows the sequence of steps. But I can run through it pretty quickly, and then Emily can tell me where I'm wrong. Once the field has been reset by the field personnel and they invite other robots on the field, teams then can come on the field and place their robots on the starting line. And while they're placing their robots, the 3 rings that were there reserved for the robots, they can load those rings onto their robot. They also set their robot to be touching or holding a wobble goal as well, because that's part of the requirement. So once all 4 robots are set up in that way, and both alliances have signaled ready to the referees, then the referees will indicate that, okay, the field is ready. And from that point on, teams are not allowed to touch their robot or their controllers until the start of the match. Then that will sometimes take a little bit. We may be introducing teams. We may be doing some other field or tournament related things, right? But once the teams have indicated to the referees and the referees have indicated that the field is ready to start play, then it's hands off for the teams with respect to the robots and their controllers. At that point, the referees will indicate to the scorekeeper, hey, we need a randomization. And the scoring system will then display on the field timer a number from 1 to 6, and likely some sort of a graphical image saying how many rings should be left on the starting point.
And that'll decide the tower goal as well?
And that will decide the target area as well.
Okay.
I don't know it.
Or not the tower goal, yeah, the target
area,
goal.
right? And so once that randomization takes place, the referees of the field reset staff will go and adjust the rings that are on the field to match what the scorekeeping system said should be there. And your robot then has to be able to detect how many rings are there when the referee says 3, 2, 1, go. So the randomization takes place after the robots are placed on the field, but before the autonomous period starts. Once the rings have been set to be either 0, 1, or 4, the referees will do just one quick double check to make sure the alliances are ready. Then they'll announce 3, 2, 1, go. The alliances can press their robot controller to get the robot started and let it move through the, start its autonomous and so forth. And once autonomous is over, you can do the match. So that's the run of match play, and especially with respect to randomization.
So to piggyback off of this, just because it's easy to answer as well, is, oh, I lost it. It was if the dice roll was the same for red and blue alliance. In a traditional event setting, yes, obviously, I think when you're in it might not work the same for a remote event just based on when you're playing your matches. But in a virtual event setting or in a traditional event setting, it for sure will be the same randomization for both teams when it's randomized on the field, because that's what it's always been in years past.
Yes, it is that way.
Okay, and then I have a question that's how far can you throw the rings? If you would like to send in a clarification on that, because I'm not quite sure what you mean by like how far can you throw it?
I suspect they meant launch.
Yeah, I suspect you mean launch. When you say how far can you launch it, it can't really, it's not supposed to go past the field. It should hit the tower goal.
Right.
And then not go any further than that. Obviously, there are accidents that are going to happen, because another question is what happens if you hit a human player? I would hope you are not shooting over the tower goal walls to hit your human players. There's netting on the tower goals, so hopefully you will never hit your human player. You might hit a ref. Please don't. It's hard enough to get refs. My refs may quit if you hit them with a ring. Just I think be careful. You don't want to shoot. I didn't really look at this because I was focused on game specific rules, but in the past it's never been above 6 feet. Is that what it is? You're not supposed to launch higher than 6 feet.
I didn't see a launch height issue.
Yeah, so in the past there's been a launch height issue. There doesn't seem to be one this year. I think if you're launching super over the field and your ring is going above the tower and like to the other side and hitting like our scorekeeper or something, that will be an issue. That's a safety issue. It's probably going to be a yellow or a red card. I don't think that there's any specific rules that would dictate otherwise how far you're shooting, as long as you're keeping it safe and within the realm of the field.
If your question was, can you shoot from one end of the field to the other? I think to the tower goals. I think the short answer is yes. That yes, you can do that. I'm going to let you scroll through and see if there's any big questions, because we're going to, because we have limited time today for this space, we're going to be wrapping it up here pretty soon.
We still have about 30 minutes, right?
I got a signal from David that we need. Is that right, David? Right? How much longer do you think we can go? No, I was planning to go to about 2:15. Okay. So we're good then. Good. Okay. Yeah, I was going to go to 2:15. My end constraint is really yours, because I know you have other things to get ready for. So give me a time when you want us to be shutting down. All right. Okay, cool. So we can keep going. So good, excellent. But yes, to get back to the question that I ended off on, you can shoot the length of the field. Just you need to be shooting in the direction of the tower goals. If you're shooting outside the fields to the sides, then you're likely to get penalized for that.
Yes.
If you happen to shoot over the nets, it's considered like, part of you were attempting to score. Unless you're consistently shooting over them, then the referees may have a discussion with you about it.
Okay, so there's a lot of things I want to answer, so I'm trying to figure out so one, can a robot play defense and block robots launching rings, like extending an arm up? No. So there is a rule about that. It is GS 10. You are not allowed to interfere with the launching of a ring if it is above 18 inches. And the reason it specifically says above 18 inches is because obviously if you're launching into a low goal and you are not above 18 inches and your opposing alliance drives by and accidentally hits the ring because they are 18 inches as a robot, there's not a lot I can do about that. But if you're actively extending up to block your opposing alliance from getting into the tower goal, that is not allowed. It will be penalized.
Yeah, once the ring is more than 18 inches above the floor, it's protected, right? And so if a robot that is launching that ring launches it starting higher than 18 inches above the floor, then you can't block it at all while it's there. So
Yes.
that's in First Tech Challenge games, defense is allowed, but usually really heavily prescribed about the kinds of things that you can do. So if you're considering defensive strategies, and I think there will be some defense in this game because there often is, but if you're looking at defensive strategies, just really understand the penalties and what the potential negatives are, because what the referees, what the game designers don't want to see is a game that suddenly becomes no fun because there's no scoring.
Okay, I've gotten several questions in this regard. Can you use the robots to push the power throw targets with an arm attached to the robot? No. The power throw targets are under the same rules as the mid and high goals. It is GS 13 defines this. You have to launch from the launch zone, and you must be completely inside the launch zone in order to get the power goals. So you can't just create something that extends and hits them. It needs to be knocked down via a ring. And so I think I've gotten several questions about that. So to answer your question, check out GS 13. The answer is no. Another is it illegal to create a mechanism that is not part of the robot that could act as ring storage for the team's robot, as in hogging more than 3 rings but not part of the robot? That is illegal in many ways. I'm not sure what else to expand on that. It is not legal to have a mechanism that is not part of your robot on the field that would aid in the game. That's a game rule that's been around for a while.
Your robot can't intentionally detach parts.
You can't intentionally detach parts, and you can't hog game elements. There's only 20 rings on the field anyway. They're gonna go fast. If you can hold 3 rings at a time, you're gonna be shooting them. They're gonna be off the field all the time. So yeah, like hoarding those rings is not going to be within the rules. It doesn't matter if it's part of your robot. Again, even if the detaching of a robot element wasn't part of it, there are a lot of rules about hoarding game elements. So that is definitely not a legal mechanism. Can there be rings on the wobble goal when you set it in the drop zone? Yes. If you're scoring rings and then you go to set it in the drop zone, I believe the answer is yes, that you can do that, and that's a valid way to score. In that breath, I had gotten another question earlier. Can you put the wobble goal on the start line and then put it outside the ring and get scoring points for both? No, it has to be one or the other.
And it's going to be whichever one it is at the end of the match.
Yes.
It's as it sits at the end of the match.
Yes.
So if you put it on the start line in the end game, and then you that's kind of weird actually, on the start at the end. Anyway, if you put it on the start line in the end game, and then later you or your partner comes and moves it to be outside the field, you only get credit for whichever state it's in at the end of the match.
Okay. I got a question. What if you hit a human player with the ring? I think I covered that earlier.
People will go, wow. and somebody may say, ow.
They're not hard, but it will be a surprise. It will shock your human player if they get hit.
Having been the recipient of one of the of some flying objects in FRC matches.
It's just not fun for anyone.
I would say, you know, we absolutely is not legal as an intentional strategy, but we don't think anybody will
so actually in this breath, Joe asked, if you carry a wobble goal with more than 3 rings, is it transporting more than 3 rings? No, that is defined very clearly in the rules, that if a ring is on a wobble goal, that it no longer applies as part of the ring possession quantity. I believe that that's actually just defined in the possession rules, is whatever the possession, the GS6, it defines that if it's on a wobble goal, it is no longer part of your robot, it is part of the wobble goal. And so it doesn't count against you. You could hold another ring on your robot somewhere and not be above possession limits.
So if I'm just going to follow on with that, Emily, and make sure that my thinking matches with yours. So if my partner comes and puts 3 rings on this wobble goal, and then I come and put 3 rings on the wobble goal, I can then pick up the wobble goal and put it outside, and that's not controlling more than 3 rings if all of that happens during endgame.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, because as soon as it becomes on the wobble goal, it's the wobble goal's possession, not your robot's possession, or at least that was my interpretation of the rules as I read through them.
Yeah, keep in mind, we've only had these rules ourselves for like a day.
Yeah.
So, you know, and, you know, when we get to a competition, there have been referee training sessions, there have been all sorts of other activities that have been taking place. And we've had the benefit of seeing matches and seeing things that happen. So, you know, anything we say here today is our best understanding of things, but it could, it could change as the season progresses, as we get a clearer understanding of the rules and clarifications from the Q&A forums.
Okay, so let me see. If you didn't do it in Autoton, can you move your wobble goal in the driver control area to score it at the end? So this interpretation for me from the rules goes back to a point from last year. So if anyone remembers from last year, if you did not have your foundation moved at the end of autonomous, you could move it during tally-op to get that score points at the end game. There's nothing explicitly, I believe, that says that this is the case in this game, but I believe that interpretation is there, that it's the same way it was last year. If your wobble goal didn't get moved during autonomous, you can move it during tally-op and then move it back during end-game to get those score points. That's typically how it's always been.
Yeah, that was my interpretation as well. Let's say that in autonomous, you know, something happened, your robot wasn't able to move the wobble goal in autonomous, or your partner wasn't able to move their wobble goal. Then during the teleoperated period and before the end game, you could go ahead and go grab that wobble goal and take it into the area that's not the launching areas. Does that other area have a name? That's close to the towers? So. Okay, but move it out of the launching area, so closer to the towers, so that when end game begins, it's now eligible to be scored in the end game by moving it back to the start line. So you don't lose the end game scoring opportunity just by virtue of having not been able to move your wobble goal during autonomous.
This is a good clarification question. The mid goal for each tower is for the opposing alliance, correct? Yes. So each tower, if you have a blue tower that's on the blue side of the field or a red tower on the red side of the field, it is for each opposing alliance. This may be different for remote events. I haven't looked through the remote event interpretation at all.
Yeah, for remote events, all three sections score for you.
Yes, that's what I assumed it would be for remote events. But in a traditional event, it does alternate, you know, to make things a little more spicy.
Well, yeah, because now, you know, if you're aiming for that top goal and your aim is off a little bit, you not only are not, you know, scoring for yourself, but you're helping the other alliance with their points. So that's something that, you know, teams will have to consider when they're designing things is, do you want to take the risk of that top goal if it means sometimes your opposition alliance gets some points out of it if your rings fly a little bit shorter, a little bit lower than you had expected?
Okay, so I had one that I had gotten earlier that I really wanted to make sure we answered because I actually didn't know the answer. Can we place more than one ring at a time in the lower goal? So scoop up all 3 rings and drop them in the lower goal. And typically in seasons past, there's a rule about like how many game elements you can score at once. And there is not this rule this year, or there's not a rule in the game specific outline that I saw. So my understanding is, because technically, like the way control is defined is if you launch one and then you launch another and then you launch the third and they just like hit repetitively in the back, they don't stop being in your possession until they hit something else. So like if you launch them and they all go in the tower goal, they don't stop being in your possession until they score. And so I would imagine if you drop all 3 at once, they're still in your possession. And so I don't see anything wrong with this. This is definitely something I may ask in the forum to clarify on, because I don't know the intention here. I would imagine this is okay, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not controlling more than 3 rings, then you can dump them all in at once, and there's no requirement that they be scored one at a time. I think you can just dump them all at once. Same thing. I've been wondering. I don't know that I would recommend this, but could you like shoot 3 at once? Like, could you launch 3 at one time?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I think that's completely legal.
Yeah, it is legal by what I see in the rules.
Yeah.
That does not mean that they are not going to update or change that.
I'd be surprised if they changed that.
Yeah.
I think scoring multiple at once is going to be just fine.
Okay, so I'm sorry, guys. I have 37 questions in here right now. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna pick and choose. You can always and I'm gonna give you a chance to just take a break to look through them too, to pick some.
Yeah.
But let me also just mention, you know, there will be the Q&A forum, of course. In North Texas, we have the North Texas First Tech Challenge Google group. And we also have roboplex.org. So if you go to roboplex.org, roboplex.org, and then go to the FTC section, there's a link there where you can sign up for the Google group. And the Google group, we'll have announcements and things going to that group, but it's also a place where you can ask questions as well. And you'll get answers not only from some of us who sit on the group who are key volunteers or people in the region, but other teams will be able to chime in as well. So, and I do expect to be holding more of these webinars in the upcoming week because we do have so many questions, and I knew this would be the case, where we'll have other opportunities for teams to be able to come in and ask these questions. So if we don't get to them today, they're certainly going to be recorded in our chat log, and we will be able to address them in upcoming meetings here very soon.
Sorry, also, I still haven't found a lot of the questions are repetitive. So
yeah, if we've already answered it, you know, we'll post the video so you can expect it there. So if you're not getting a response, it's not we don't like you.
Yes. Real fast, what was the Wobble goal weight? Because I know we had multiple questions about that.
I will measure it again, but I don't remember.
I couldn't either.
Wait, I have to wait for my thing to
while he's figuring this out, there's one that I would like to answer. If your robot is in possession of 3 rings and your robot just touches a ring that is on the ground, will you be penalized? No. So if you read GS6 control possessions, the control and possession outline of ruling, it becomes multiple possession. Like if you're holding 3 and you run into another one, that's not a big deal. It's when you look like you're intentionally like hoarding them or pushing them to an advantageous way. If it's just incidental and inconsequential, it's not a big deal. But like if you're clearly like pushing them around while you're moving to keep your opponent from being able to get them or something like that, that's where the penalty starts. If it's just you roll over a ring, it's okay. It happens.
Yeah, and I think the key phrase in the book, in the manual, if I remember, is you're controlling it or possessing it if the ring is moving with the robot.
Yes.
So if you're holding 3 and as you're driving along, your robot picks up another one and they're moving together, then you're controlling 4, and the 4th one would get you a penalty. If you're
if the 4th one is inconsequential, it says if you're plowing.
Right. So if you're plowing, right? So
yeah.
If you're plowing, so you're driving along and your robot nudges one out of the way as it's going through, that's plowing. And in that particular case, you wouldn't get penalized just because you nudged one out of the way. It's if the ring appears to be traveling with the robot.
Yes.
Is what's being looked for.
You have the.
Oh yes. So the Wobble goal is 410 grams, and that's for all of you who are scientists and engineers who work in metric. It is 14.4 ounces for the rest of us.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. I'm going to take this time to drop game-specific rules. Please ask in the chat that Patrick talked about. I've seen multiple questions from what looks like rookies that I would like to address very quickly. If your robot gets stuck, breaks down, or tips over, are you allowed to touch and reset it? No. During the match, especially during traditional events, I think we're going to figure out the rules for remote events as it happens and as the season goes forward. But during traditional events, that is very unsafe. You're not allowed to enter the field. No one's allowed to enter the field during a match because, you know, it's while robots are moving around, it's easy to get injured. And to avoid that, you are not allowed to break the plane of the field. I watched it happen last year with a team who shall remain unnamed. They know who they are, where their robot dragged their controller and phone off into the field in autonomous, and then they reached in and grabbed it in autonomous, which is arguably the worst time to enter the field. And it ended up being like several major penalties because of just how unsafe it was. So yeah, you cannot go in and reset it. I understand that can be difficult, especially when you're a remote event environment, but it's the standard of the rule, and I would prefer just to say that across the board, do not do it. The other thing is what happens if you disconnect during a match. In a traditional event, an FTA or field personnel will come over and help you get started back up. I don't know how we're handling that in remote events, if Joe's just gonna be on call all week to help you, or how that's going to happen. But just in general, it's all about robot safety. There are a lot of things. If you're a rookie, please familiarize yourself with the rules. It's going to be very helpful to you, and it'll reduce the amount of penalties you are going to get in the season because you don't know the rules. So please read through the game manual backwards and forwards. That is the best advice I can offer y'all.
Yeah, it's worth saying, especially for people who are new to First Tech Challenge and our different robot things, that robot failures are actually part of the game. That things happen at an event where your robot doesn't do what it was expected to, or something had changed. I've seen events where one robot accidentally runs into another robot's power switch, and that's not considered a penalty for either robot, but the robot that got powered down stays powered down for the rest of the match, and that's just considered part of the game. So you want to build your robot to be as reliable and robust as you can, but on those unfortunate times where something goes wrong with the robot, something goes wrong with the control system or whatever, veteran teams will tell you, you just move on from there and say, oops, we lost that match, or we didn't score as much as we needed to in that match, and try again. But robot failures are just considered to be part of the challenge.
So unfortunately, guys, it is 2:16,
Yep.
and to be courteous to Rev, we need to go ahead and sign off.
Can we pull Joe in real quick just to see if he has any last words, just for real quick, if he's still around?
Yes.
Joe again's our first senior mentor. He's usually such a large presence at our kickoff events. I wanted to make sure he had a chance to be in. So, Joe, do you have any final thoughts or words?
No, y'all did a great job.
All right. Well, thanks.
That's about it.
We're always
can't
glad
wait.
to see you at our events.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
What do you think of the game, Joe? Do you like it?
Oh yeah, it looks interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see about the frisbee thing, because those rings are squishier than frisbees. But
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. All right. So
yeah, to be courteous to Rev, we're gonna go ahead and bounce.
sign off. Yeah.
I will say just to plug for Rev that they are having a game breakdown live stream at 3 p.m. So in about 45 minutes, they will be back here in this very studio broadcasting on YouTube. Our links are posted on the Instagram, on the Rev Instagram, and probably the Facebook if you want access to that. But definitely come, and there will be more game breakdowns from Rev at 3.
Yes. And I believe they're going to be looking at like robot design ideas and things like that is what they're looking at. So highly encourage teams, especially rookie teams that are like going, what can we possibly do? Then that's going to be a good resource for you to begin looking at. All right. Well, thank you all for signing in, for joining. Thanks for all the fantastic questions. Watch the Google group and other sources for announcements of other webinars. We plan to have a bunch of these over the next few weeks, and we'll try to get to all your questions. I'm glad you're here. I hope we could answer some of the big questions that were there, and we'll look for you at future events throughout the season. Thank you, Emily, for joining us and for handling the questions so well, and have a good season, everybody. Thanks a lot.